My school's bullies tormented me for having autism, while their mom ran for PTA president on an anti-bullying platform, so I let them beat me up on election day and exposed their hypocrisy in front of the entire school board. When I was in junior high, I stopped hanging out with the bullies in my class, so their ringleader Bryce told them to gang up on me. They never cared about me having autism before, but now they made it their favorite thing to mention. Bryce Scallywag and his friends would make exaggerated flapping motions whenever I walked by. Then it escalated to stealing my noise-canceling headphones and hiding them in trash cans. By January, they were shoving me into lockers and filming my meltdowns to post on the school meme page run by students. The first time it happened, I tried going to the guidance counselor. When I walked in, Mrs. Saratoga barely looked up from her computer. "Can I talk to Principal Williams about Bryce and his friends?" I was then interrupted by her looking up at me with this condescending smile. "I know exactly what you people do. Always thinking that normal teenage interactions count as bullying. Always looking for attention." I swear I thought she was pranking me, but then she handed me a brochure for communication skills and went back to filing her nails. I smiled, because I had an ace up my sleeve. Principal Williams was my dad, but her dismissal made me realize something. If the guidance counselor wouldn't believe me without proof, maybe my dad wouldn't either. He was always so careful about showing favoritism at school. That's when I hatched my plan. I started crying more visibly when they pushed me. I ate lunch alone in predictable spots where they could corner me. I accidentally walked down empty hallways when I knew they'd be there. I documented everything in a password-protected folder on my phone. Screenshots of the meme page, blurry recordings when I could manage it. Bryce got bolder. He went from shoving to actual punches. His sister Kayla would hold my arms while he'd practice his boxing moves on my stomach. His best friend Connor liked to dump my backpack in the toilet. They thought I was too scared and weak to tell anyone. But after a few weeks, I finally had enough evidence to tell my dad. That night, I felt like a kid waiting for Christmas morning, because I knew my dad would destroy them. I woke up before my alarm and strolled downstairs with a confidence I'd never felt before. My dad was already there, making pancakes with smiley faces like he used to when I was little. I sat down with a huge smile. "Hey, kiddo," he exclaimed. "I have something that I've been keeping from you," he said, flipping a pancake. "I'm in the process of retiring, and it should kick into place soon. They're making the announcement at school today." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. He continued, practically bouncing with excitement. "With the retirement package, we can finally afford that Disney cruise you've always wanted. 7 whole days, just our family." I forced myself to smile and squeal about the cruise while my stomach dropped. Without Dad as principal, I had no nuclear option. My evidence meant nothing if he couldn't do anything about it. At school that day, I sat in the bathroom trying not to panic. Then I overheard Bryce and his friend talking by the sinks. "My mom's totally going to win the school board election. Her whole platform is about stopping bullying. She even got that news station to interview her." That's when it clicked. Mrs. Scallywag, Bryce's mom, was running for PTA president on an anti-bullying platform. The irony was so perfect, I almost laughed. The election was in 3 days. I spent those days being extra pathetic, extra vulnerable. On election day, I waited by the gym after school, knowing they always went there to vape. When Bryce saw me alone, his eyes lit up. "Look who's asking for it," he said, cracking his knuckles. Connor and 2 other guys formed a circle around me. I didn't fight back. Not when Bryce's fist connected with my eye. Not when Connor kicked my ribs. Not when they took turns seeing who could leave the biggest bruise. Instead, curled up and took it with a chaotic excitement pumping through my veins. They left me there when they got bored. I waited 10 minutes before limping towards the auditorium. My face was swelling. My ribs screamed with each breath, but I had a huge smile on my face. The whispers started immediately. People pointed at my black eye. Someone gasped. I walked straight to the front where the current board member sat. "Mrs. Scallywag says she'll protect kids like me," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "But her children Bryce and Kayla did this to me yesterday. Your son beat the crap out of me, Mrs. Scallywag." The auditorium erupted. Parents started talking over each other. Some people pulled out their phones, probably texting other parents or maybe even recording. Mrs. Henderson's face went from campaign smile to pure shock in about 2 seconds. Her perfectly applied lipstick suddenly looked garish against her pale face. She stood up immediately and accused me of lying and being dramatic. Her voice went shrill. She pointed out that kids with autism often misinterpret social situations. She actually said we don't understand social cues properly. Several parents murmured agreement. I could hear them whispering about how I probably just fell or something. One dad said kids these days are too sensitive. The assembly moderator, an older man with kind eyes, suggested postponing the election, but Mrs. Henderson insisted on proceeding. She said these were baseless accusations from a troubled student. She actually used air quotes when she said troubled. Her campaign manager whispered urgently in her ear, but she waved him off. I tried to show my phone evidence, but realized the school meme page had been deleted. My heart sank. I still had some screenshots, but they looked less convincing without the original source. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through my photos, trying to find the clearest ones. The screen was cracked from when Vincent had knocked it out of my hands last week. Mrs. Henderson won the election, though, by a smaller margin than expected. She got like 60% instead of the landslide everyone predicted. I stood there watching her give her victory speech about protecting all students while my eye throbbed. She thanked everyone for their trust and promised to make our school the safest in the district. Behind her, I could see Nicholas in the crowd, smirking at me. He made a subtle punching motion with his fist. The message was clear. This wasn't over. The next day at school was worse than I expected. Nicholas had already spread his version of events to everyone who would listen. He told people I was obsessed with him and had been following him around for weeks. He said I threw myself down the stairs behind the gym to frame him because he rejected me last year. The worst part was some kids actually believed it. I walked into first period and conversation stopped mid-sentence. People stared at my black eye like it was contagious. Alan, who usually let me copy his math notes, moved his desk away from mine with a scraping sound that seemed to echo through the room. I sat there trying to focus on algebra while whispers buzzed around me like angry wasps. Between classes, Sophia cornered me by my locker with 3 of her friends forming a semicircle around me. She got right in my face and told me I was pathetic. She said everyone knew I was just trying to get attention because nobody wanted to be my friend. Her breath smelled like mint gum and malice. One of her friends recorded the whole thing on her phone, probably hoping I'd have another meltdown they could post somewhere. I kept my head down and tried to get through the day. At lunch, I headed to my usual spot in the library, but found Nicholas and Vincent already there, sprawled across the chairs I normally used. They were talking loudly about how some people hurt themselves for attention. Vincent mentioned he'd seen a documentary about people who gave themselves bruises. They kept glancing at me and laughing. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, just shushed them half-heartedly and went back to her computer. I ended up eating in a bathroom stall again. My sandwich tasted like cardboard and defeat. While I sat there, I heard 2 girls come in talking about the assembly. One said her mom thought I seemed really hurt. The other said her dad told her to stay away from me because I was clearly unstable. That word, unstable, unstable, echoed in my head for the rest of the day. After school, I found a note in my locker from Catherine, my only real friend. It said she needed to talk to me. My heart lifted for about 2 seconds until I read the rest. She wrote that her parents didn't want her hanging out with me anymore. They thought I was becoming a bad influence. She said she was sorry, but she had to listen to them. The note was written in purple gel pen, the same one I'd given her for her birthday. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. Then I fished it out because I'm apparently a masochist who likes to reread painful things. I walked home alone, taking the long way to avoid Nicholas's usual route. My ribs still hurt with every step, a sharp reminder of yesterday's attack. At home, I found my parents in the kitchen having a tense conversation. They stopped talking when I walked in, which is never a good sign. My mom was supposed to be traveling for work, but she was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop closed. My dad looked tired, like he'd aged 5 years overnight. He told me Mrs. Kendall had called. She was concerned about my mental health and suggested I might benefit from a different educational environment. She'd used phrases like emotional disturbance and inability to cope with normal peer interactions. My mom's jaw was clenched so tight, I thought she might crack a tooth. My dad explained that the superintendent had already called him too. He reminded my dad that he needed to stay neutral during his transition period, or he could lose his pension. 20 years of service and they were holding his retirement money hostage. My dad's hands shook as he told me this. He'd worked so hard for our family's future and now he was trapped. My mom had to leave for her work trip the next morning. She hugged me extra long and promised we'd figure this out when she got back. She told me to document everything and stay strong, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She was leaving her kid in a war zone and we both knew it. The next few days blurred together in a haze of humiliation. Nicholas had refined his story. Now he was telling everyone I'd been stalking him since 7th grade. He showed people old yearbook photos where I happened to be in the background as proof. He claimed I'd been following him to the gym for weeks, watching him work out. Some girls started calling me creepy. Even teachers looked at me differently. Vincent backed up every word. He told people he'd seen me taking pictures of Nicholas during PE. He said I'd written Nicholas love letters that they had to throw away because they were so disturbing. None of it was true, but the truth didn't seem to matter anymore. The story had taken on a life of its own. At lunch, I sat alone at a table in the corner of the cafeteria. Nicholas walked by with his whole crew and loudly announced that stalkers shouldn't be allowed in school. He said it loud enough for the lunch monitors to hear. They did nothing. One of them actually nodded like he had a point. Mrs. Henderson implemented her first school board initiative that week. She created a peer mediation program for students with behavioral issues. Guess who got named as a peer counselor? Nicholas, of course. And guess who got assigned to mandatory sessions? Me, obviously. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I had to sit in a small room with Nicholas twice a week while he documented my progress. He'd ask me why I felt the need to lie about other students. He'd suggest I had trouble distinguishing reality from fantasy. He wrote everything down in this official-looking notebook. I wanted to grab it and rip it to shreds, but that would just prove his point about my anger issues. My grades started slipping. How was I supposed to focus on the Revolutionary War when I was living through my own personal battle? My English teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, asked if everything was okay at home. I almost laughed. Home was the only place that was okay. School had become my own personal nightmare. My younger brother Noel mentioned something interesting at dinner one night. He said Nicholas had been bragging on Xbox Live about teaching someone a lesson. Noel had been playing Fortnite with his friends when Nicholas joined their party chat. Nicholas didn't know Noel was my brother. Different last names because Noel took our stepdad's name. Noel had recorded some of it on his phone. The audio was muffled and hard to understand, but you could hear Nicholas laughing about making someone cry. You could hear Vincent in the background saying something about lockers. It wasn't exactly a smoking firearm, but it was something. Noel transferred the file to my phone, proud to help his big sister. One day after peer mediation, Harper approached me in the hallway. Harper had been part of Nicholas's group, but always seemed uncomfortable with their crueler pranks. They looked around nervously before telling me they were sorry. They said they knew what really happened behind the gym. They'd seen the whole thing from the window of the weight room. My heart raced. Finally, someone who could back up my story. But then Harper shook their head. They said they couldn't say anything publicly. Their parents were friends with the Hendersons. Their dad worked for Nicholas's uncle. If they spoke up, their whole family would suffer. They apologized again and walked away, leaving me more frustrated than ever. The peer mediation sessions got worse. Nicholas started bringing in evidence of my supposed obsession. He had a photo of me at the mall that his sister took, claiming I was following them. Really, I'd been there with my mom buying school supplies. He had a screenshot of me viewing his Instagram profile, like that was some kind of crime. Everyone looked at everyone's profiles. He documented me as uncooperative when I refused to admit to stalking him. He wrote that I showed signs of delusional thinking when I maintained my version of events. The notebook was filling up with his lies, and there was nothing I could do about it. Mrs. Henderson would review these notes at the end of the month. My bruises healed, fading from purple to green to yellow before disappearing completely. Without visible evidence, people started believing Nicholas's version more and more. Even some teachers seemed to avoid me now. Ms. Martinez, who used to chat with me about books, now just nodded politely and kept walking. Mr. Thompson moved my seat in chemistry, claiming it was for a new seating chart, but I ended up isolated in the back corner. The school felt smaller every day. Places I used to feel safe became danger zones. The library, the art room, even the guidance office, though that had never really been safe. I started mapping out routes that would minimize contact with Nicholas's group. I became an expert at disappearing, at being invisible. Then Mrs. Henderson scheduled a school board meeting about implementing stricter policies for students who make false accusations. The flyer she sent home might as well have had my picture on it. She wanted to create consequences for students who wrongly accused others of bullying. She called it protecting innocent students from malicious lies. My mom finally returned from her work trip. She took one look at me and knew things had gotten worse. I'd lost weight. I wasn't sleeping well. I'd started pulling out my eyebrow hairs, an old nervous habit I thought I'd outgrown. She sat on my bed and held me while I told her everything. Every humiliation, every lie, every moment of feeling completely powerless. She believed me. Without question, without doubt, she believed me. She said we were going to fix this. She had that look she got when she was solving a problem at work, focused and determined. She asked to see all my evidence. We spent hours going through my phone, organizing everything I'd saved. That's when she noticed something I'd missed. Sophia had posted Instagram stories from the day of the beating. She was one of those kids who documented every moment of her life. In the background of one video, you could see me walking toward the gym alone. The timestamp proved I'd been there first, contradicting Nicholas's stalking story. My mom started digging deeper. She found a Snapchat from Vincent that he thought had disappeared. His friend Remy had screenshotted it before it vanished. It showed Vincent's knuckles with the caption "got him good" and a laughing emoji. The timestamp matched the day I'd been struck. Remy's mom worked with mine and had mentioned her son was worried about something at school. We also discovered that 3 other students had been targeted by Nicholas's group over the past year. My mom reached out to their parents carefully, not wanting to spook them. 2 were too scared to get involved, but one mom Gloria, said her daughter Samantha had been keeping a diary about the harassment. She'd been too scared to come forward after seeing what happened to me. My mom compiled everything into a presentation. She was methodical about it, creating a timeline with evidence for each point. She included the social media posts, the audio recording from Noel, statements from Samantha's diary with permission. She even found old disciplinary records showing Nicholas had been in trouble for bullying in elementary school before his mom joined the school board. The night before the next school board meeting, I couldn't sleep. I kept running through all the ways it could go wrong. What if they didn't believe us? What if Mrs. Henderson convinced them I was just a troubled kid making things up? What if this made everything worse? My dad sat with me at the kitchen table at 2 a.m., making hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. He couldn't say much because of his position, but he told me he was proud of me. He said standing up to bullies was the hardest thing a person could do. He said sometimes the system fails us, but that doesn't mean we stop fighting. His words helped, but the fear remained. The next morning, I put on my nicest clothes. My mom said looking presentable mattered, even though it shouldn't. We arrived at the school board meeting early. The same auditorium where I'd shown up struck and bloody now felt like a courtroom where I was both victim and defendant. Mrs. Henderson was already there, surrounded by her supporters. She wore a navy suit and her campaign smile. When she saw us, her expression flickered for just a moment before returning to that practiced pleasantness. Nicholas sat in the front row, looking confident. He actually winked at me. The meeting started with regular business, budget reports, curriculum updates, things that seemed insignificant compared to what we were there for. Finally, it was time for public comments. My mom stood up first. She introduced herself professionally and asked to present evidence regarding ongoing bullying at the school. Mrs. Henderson immediately objected. She said this was a matter that should be handled through proper channels, not at a public meeting. She reminded everyone that false accusations could ruin innocent children's lives. Several parents nodded in agreement. I could feel the room's opinion already tilting against us. But my mom persisted. She pulled up her presentation on the projector they used for budget reports. The first slide showed the Instagram story with me walking alone toward the gym. She explained how this contradicted claims that I had been stalking anyone. The timestamp was clear. The location was unmistakable. She moved through each piece of evidence methodically. The Snapchat of Vincent's knuckles caused a stir. Parents started whispering. Mrs. Henderson's face went from confident to concerned. When my mom played the audio recording from Noel, you could hear a pin drop in the room. Nicholas's voice was distorted but recognizable, laughing about making someone cry. Then something unexpected happened. Harper stood up. Their parents tried to pull them back down, but they shook them off. They walked to the microphone and said they'd been a coward. They confirmed they'd seen Nicholas and his friends attack me behind the gym. They described what they'd witnessed in detail. Their voice shook, but they kept going. That opened the floodgates. 2 other students came forward. A girl named Diana said she'd seen Vincent dumping my backpack in the toilet multiple times. A boy named Arden admitted he'd been pressured to share the meme page posts, but had refused. Even a lunch monitor finally spoke up, saying she'd seen concerning behavior but hadn't known how to report it. Mrs. Henderson tried damage control. She said teenagers sometimes got carried away. She suggested peer mediation could resolve these issues. She actually had the nerve to point out that her son had been volunteering as a peer counselor. Someone in the back actually laughed at that. The board voted to launch a formal investigation. It wasn't the immediate justice I'd hoped for, but it was something. Nicholas was suspended for 2 weeks pending the investigation. Vincent got 1 week. Sophia faced no consequences because technically she hadn't been caught doing anything on school property. The injustice of that burned, but I tried to focus on the partial victory. Mrs. Kendall claimed she'd just been following protocol. She said she couldn't have known the situation was serious without proper documentation. She kept her job, but had to attend additional training on recognizing bullying. It felt like a slap on the wrist for someone who dismissed my pain so easily. My dad used his remaining time as principal to push through some anti-bullying policies. They weren't as strong as he wanted. The board watered them down significantly, but they included mandatory reporting procedures and consequences for staff who ignored bullying reports. It was his last act as principal, and I could see how much he wished he could do more. The investigation concluded that Nicholas had indeed engaged in bullying behavior. His permanent record would reflect this. He had to attend counseling and perform community service, but he remained at school. I'd see him in the hallways, more careful now, but still smirking when teachers weren't looking. Vincent transferred to a private school. His parents decided a fresh start was best. The Hendersons kept their social standing in the community. Mrs. Henderson remained on the school board. She pivoted her platform to focus on restorative justice and second chances. She gave interviews about how her family had learned and grown from the experience. Local news ate it up. The reformed bully's mom teaching others about compassion. My family made the decision to transfer me to Riverside High across town. It meant waking up an hour earlier and my mom driving me before work. But it also meant hallways where nobody knew my story. It meant teachers who didn't look at me with pity or suspicion. It meant a chance to just be a student again. On my last day at my old school, I cleaned out my locker one final time. Catherine was there, cleaning out hers a few lockers down. We made eye contact and she mouthed, "I'm sorry." I nodded and kept packing. Some friendships couldn't survive the pressure and I was learning to accept that. Nicholas passed by as I carried my last box to the car. He didn't say anything but made a subtle gesture with his fist. The message was clear. He'd won. He was still there, still popular, still protected by his mother's position. And I was the one leaving. But as I drove away with my mom, I realized something. I'd spoken up. I'd fought back. I'd refused to be silenced. At Riverside, I found my people. Kids who understood sensory overload and social struggles. Teachers who saw my autism as a difference, not a deficit. I joined the robotics club and discovered I was really good at coding. I made friends who liked me for who I was, not despite it. The nightmares about Nicholas faded, replaced by dreams about college and future possibilities. 6 months later, I heard through social media that 3 more students had come forward about Nicholas. His pattern of behavior was becoming impossible to ignore. Mrs. Henderson quietly stepped down from the school board, citing personal reasons. Nicholas finished high school with a reputation that followed him. Sometimes justice comes slowly, but it does come. I graduated from Riverside with honors. My dad, now happily retired and teaching part-time at the community college, cried at my graduation. My mom took approximately 1 million photos. Noel, now taller than me, whooped embarrassingly loud when they called my name. I walked across that stage knowing I'd survived something that tried to break me.